Hello and welcome to another episode of Make Love Real, How to Create More Love in Your Life. I'm Mia Saenz, and I'm really excited to introduce you to Rebecka Eggers, our next guest in this episode, because there's many aspects about this woman that I'm crazy about. I think she's one of the most intelligent women that I've ever met, and she teaches or she supports us through our healing process with trauma. I've asked her today to talk about attachment theories because no one can talk about this stuff like Rebecka. So first, let's welcome Rebecka. Welcome, honey. It's great to have you on the show.
Hi, Mia. Well, it's true. I can talk about attachment theory with some passion, but I will provide to you actually a really great resource for people to read up on it. So much of what I am going to talk about comes from this resource that really puts the attachment theory research in a light that I think people who've struggled with trauma and who've struggled with painful relationships can really understand. So I'm going to talk about some of the information from that resource today. It's called Attached. I should have had it in front of me, but it has a secondary title. So I'll get you all of that, and you can post it along with my free gift if that's okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So I'm all about studying and sharing the resources that I study, and this particular resource made a huge difference in the way that I saw my relationship, my past, the trauma that I've been through, the trauma that other people go through, my clients' struggles to be loved, and the way that we relate to each other in general. It also made me look at the dating world and have just a grand, healthy dose of skepticism for the way that we talk to women in particular about, winning a man. It just often really goes against the truth of what's happening in the dating world.
It sounds fabulous. I know that everybody, Rebecka is one of the only people that I will actually work with because she's just that amazing. And when we went over some of this stuff a couple years ago, it just totally changed the way I saw things, and it's very important. So I'll let you, we can either go into a beautiful conversation here, or why don't you share what you'd like to share with us, and then we'll have a conversation when you come up for air.
Okay, so you tell me when I've given enough theory, and then we can start the conversation. So I think it can really be made very simple. Obviously, there's a whole book about it, so there's a lot you could say about the nuances, but at its core, the information I'm going to give you should be liberating, and it should be viewed through a pretty simple lens. People have a range of attachment styles, and those attachment styles in many ways are adaptive, and according to the research, they are inherited. So we often think that someone who has what you might call an insecure or avoidant attachment style has been through trauma themselves, and that is the reason why they can't commit or they tend to run away from closeness or whatever. But that's not actually what the research shows. That doesn't mean that, for instance, the insecure attachment style or avoidant attachment style isn't associated with traumatic circumstances. Historically speaking, it's an adaptation to that, and it gets passed down through the genetics as a coping style. So what my dog's decided he needs his kibble, so we might hear him nibbling in the background. So when someone has the avoidant or insecure attachment style, this is the typical unavailable person, right? Like they can even have traits that are pretty cruel, cold, and distant to those of us who have, in particular, what's more like an insecure attachment style, where we're just sort of like, our adaptation is to cling closer. And what the research actually shows is that both of these are adaptations to adverse circumstances. So one is, if I have as little attachment as possible, when I lose people to adverse circumstances, I'll be better off. And the other one is, if I cling to people as tightly as possible, in adverse circumstances, I'll have a better chance of making it through. So I'll do anything to sustain the attachment. And on the other side is the person who will pretty much spends all of their time breaking the attachment, even though the underlying current is of a continual relationship. The attachment is constantly broken. So this is a new way of looking at this dynamic, because who do you think actually get together and try to build relationships?
I know.
Often it's the person with the avoidant, with the insecure and the avoidant come together and
we make a mess.
Yes, they make a mess. So there's another attachment style, which is a secure attachment style. And this attachment style is associated with someone who expects to have their needs met, expects to meet other people's needs, and is really about sustaining intimacy. So here's my big bombshell, and I got this from the book that I'm going to recommend to you, but it was one of those moments where I was like, oh, there's a whole industry built on this lie. Who do you think spends most of their time in the dating pool? It's people with the avoidant attachment style, because they have ruptured relationships more often.
I see
people
that.
Who have, so people who have secure attachment styles are off having relationships. Sometimes they're having relationships with someone who has an avoidant style because it doesn't bother them, because they expect to meet people's needs and they expect other people to meet their needs. And so when the avoidant person is moving away, they don't think, oh, this person is abandoning me and my life is in danger, like the insecure attachment person does, right? So insecure attachment people may also spend a lot more time in the dating pool for ruptured relationships, because they're in relationships or trying to make relationships work with people who have avoidant attachment styles. But when they're with someone who has a secure attachment style, it works actually very well, because the secure attachment person is trying to meet their needs. So my big bombshell for today is, if you're with someone who has an avoidant style, you can't necessarily adapt your behavior strategically or tactically to have a better relationship with them. So all this dating advice that's out there about be more alluring, activate the hero in him, like all these things that are aimed mostly at women, even though men and women fall into these two categories. Women get a lot more marketing aimed at them, trying to make them adapt their perhaps insecure attachment style to someone who's avoidant. And the advice is not wrong, in the sense that, and here's the critical piece, if you are an insecure attachment person and you want to be in a relationship with an avoidant person, someone who doesn't want to be in it, doesn't feel comfortable in attachment, you will have to do all of the adjusting. So that dating advice is true in the sense that it's all aimed at changing the person who feels insecure in their relationships, who's afraid their needs won't be met, changing them tactically into someone who appears more like they have a secure attachment style. But here is the really, really good news. Attachment styles are set but malleable. So instead of working on the behaviors that take you closer in appearance to being in a secure attachment style, you can actually work on developing within yourself more of the being of a secure attachment style over time. And that takes doing some emotional work and really going deeper into this, but you can actually move. And as you move, it's possible for someone who has an avoidant attachment style to actually move more towards secure as well. But this is not something where you're acting upon the relationship through gimmicks or even trying to get your needs met in the relationship. This is you moving yourself more into an attachment style that is secure, changing your expectations to actually have your needs met. And this is really different from the dating advice that's out there, because it's usually about how to appear to be more secure. how to appear to have other interests, which, by the way, when you are when you're the insecure attachment style getting together with the avoidant attachment style, you don't have any other interests. You're faking it. That's all you're interested in, is cementing that bond. So you're pretending to feel more secure than you do, as compared to literally shifting within yourself to a place of actually expecting and looking for others to meet your needs. Not forcing others to meet your needs, not trying to be more alluring, but actually having that expectation that others will meet your needs, that others are trying to. But really, the best strategy for you is to actually find someone who has the secure attachment style, someone with whom you can be comfortable, someone who really does want to meet your needs. Because like I said, if you want to bridge the gap to someone who's avoidant, then you are going to have to do all the adjusting.
Okay, so here's where I want to hop in, because you and I have both been at this. We've known each other probably close to 8-9 years, and we've both been in this game of what we love to do for like 10 years. So if not a little longer. What we have found is people are frustrated because they don't understand. Why I wanted you to share this is, when we were working together on a situation just like that, I realized that I was the insecure from my upbringing, and I was interested in an avoidant. And what that created was a mucky mess, right? Until then I got into a relationship, and I'm married, and my husband is a secure. So I could see how that process worked. And I'm not perfect. We have the ability, is this correct, Rebecka? We have the ability, being an insecure, to grow into a secure position. The avoidants have the ability to grow into a secure position.
But not the motivation usually, because they don't feel this tension. When they're running away from intimacy, they're comfortable.
Right.
So we're really uncomfortable when they're running away from intimacy. And I confess that, like, my attachment style has always tended more towards the insecure, sort of like feeling like nobody's going to meet my needs side. And I've really been moving more towards the secure side, but it takes a lot of work. It's like changing a core feature of what you think of as your identity or personality, and it's malleable, but it's sure not easy.
Well, that's when I got all excited in the beginning here, a few minutes ago, because it's about the core work. We both do things on healing the core of who we are. But do people really want that? They say they do, but they're not moving towards it. Is it just too fearful, in your opinion, for them?
I think it's actually that most people are caught up in the disinformation of the dating market, because this most often shows up in our dating relationships. I mean, obviously we may be a child who has an avoidant parent, and that's where the pattern kind of gets set. But as adults, this most often shows up for us in our dating relationships, and we don't realize that there's an overabundance of avoidant types in the dating pool. And so we think that there's something wrong with us. If only I can do this, that, or the other thing, then these people will be interested in me. They'll stop running away and want to make themselves available. And we hear these magical stories about the miracle man who turned himself around when the woman just changed how she approached the situation. And honestly, what the authors of the book said is, if you are if you're insecure in your attachment style and you meet someone who is avoidant in their attachment style, you should just not do it, because it will literally like drive you insane, and you will spend your life having to make the adjustments. But if you're willing to make those adjustments, know that they will all be yours.
It's really fascinating, because people never gave this much thought, and this is what I want to also talk about. People never gave this much thought to who they were, to their relationships. But over millennia, they've been miserable, literally. We've come to a place in time where it's socially okay for us and acceptable to switch and change our life around. This is where I would assume that the masses would become masses and jump into the game since there is information out there. There's a space between wanting and doing. Can you talk on that a little bit?
The space between wanting and doing. Well, wanting to have a secure attachment type of relationship without the doing means that you continue to chase after people who are running away, and they're running away because that's their survival strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the wanting, but your doing is not in alignment. Mm-hmm. Wanting and doing in alignment is actually working to shift yourself, if you want to do that shift, to being more secure in your attachment style. But it also means shutting the door, or knowingly making the adjustments that you need to make to be with someone who's in the avoidant attachment style. So it's the wanting and doing accordingly is taking responsibility for what this information means. Mm-hmm. And acting on that. This information means that you don't need a tactic or a seduction strategy to make someone who's walking away pay attention to you. It won't help you. It's in the realm of fantasy. You can't keep up that seduction strategy forever. And then you wind up in a relationship long-term where there's no space for your needs. And I just want to connect this. Actually, my daughter is a genius, if I might go off on a tiny little tangent. Mm-hmm. This morning, as I was preparing for this, my daughter, who is in the university, is studying gender studies, and she wrote to me about the genius essay that she published this morning. And it was genius, looking at the ways in which women bargain the erotic away. We give away, not as in we seduce men with it, but as in we bury the erotic in order to have security in our lives. And I started to relate that to what we're talking about today. And she actually quoted an author, and I want to say it was Audre Lorde, but it might have been a different author. I'll try to get you a citation on that also. And that the definition of the erotic has to do, according to this author, with how deeply we can feel while we are doing things. Mm-hmm. And if we are using tactics to try to pull someone with an avoidant attachment style into a relationship with us, it won't be long before our sensuality, our erotic nature is dead, because we've formed a relationship where we're not allowed to feel deeply. There's no room for our deep feeling in that relationship. So we're killing the erotic. We're bartering away the erotic, as my daughter was talking about, in exchange for quote unquote security, in exchange for holding on to this kind of conflicted attachment style relationship. So we can just let it go.
Yeah.
There's nothing more we have to do.
It's fascinating, and I know your daughter is brilliant because her mother is brilliant.
Well, she might have a few laps on me there, Mia.
Well, she got motivated by you and your feminine work that you do. I mean, it's very incredibly powerful. And when you were saying about when we connect with an avoidant, and just in the latter part there about the eroticism, if you have an avoidant who's erotic with you, then you're not going to lose it. But
I disagree with you. You lose your eroticism because your ability to feel deeply. There's no space in the relationship with the avoidant for you to feel deeply. And I'm not just talking about feeling sensuality deeply. I'm actually talking about what happens when, the orgasm is over and everyday life resumes, when there's no space for you to actually feel the distance, the pain of the distance, to express that, to have that received. Eventually that does impact on how deeply erotic we are, because when we can't bring all of who we are to the erotic experience, it becomes more surface. It might manifest as like spending a lot of time during the erotic experience kind of lost in your head, lost in fantasy, instead of being connected to the other person, because the connection hasn't been nurtured by truthful sharing. There's no space for truthful sharing.
Mm-hmm. True. That's very true. it's kind of a scary place to be, I guess, isn't it?
But it's a space that, if we take my daughter's point to heart, it's a space that we as women go to kind of automatically. And this brings up the intersection between male privilege and avoidant attachment styles. Because when it's a man who has the avoidant attachment style, there's a whole industry that has built up around teaching women how to get her man, right? And that means bargaining away who she naturally is in order to show up in a way that works for him.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no emphasis on finding someone who would actually be interested in who you are as you are. And that's the hallmark of a secure attachment person, is that they want to meet your needs as they really are. And they want to know you as you really are.
Right. Which is very powerful, which is the ultimate place we want to be. We want to be seen and heard for the most part, because some people don't, I realize that Rebecca and I work closely together at times. I just love her. And I was writing an email to my people, and I was realizing that we can't truly feel deeply, right? And be satisfied. It's like what you're talking about, and be satisfied in a relationship, because we want to be seen and heard. Years ago, I didn't want to be seen and heard when I was depleted and quiet and shy and so introverted that I didn't want to come out. I was never the best cheerleader because I wanted to do it. It was cool. I didn't really want to be seen and judged. I was a singer in a rock band. I didn't project as well because I didn't really want to be judged, when really I was probably being judged for not singing loud enough, So it's an interesting dichotomy to see where we eventually, or where we were at one point, but to move into the space of that openness. Currently, I'm one who wants to be seen and heard by my partner. But before, when I recognized that, when I was writing this letter to people, which I haven't sent out yet, but it was amazing, because to be able to see that was mind-blowing for me. That was an aspect of, that was a totally different person. And it's interesting how, are we ready, as an individual, are they ready to be seen? Are they ready to be heard? This is why this is so beautiful, to understand that these things are out there to explain to us, to help us shift, to create exactly what we want. So if I'm not mistaken, an insecure will want to help shift their life. Generally, an avoidant won't, because there's nothing wrong and they just keep moving on, right?
And they don't feel it in the same way. When they feel acutely uncomfortable is actually when someone's coming at them with intimacy. So they feel much more content, according to the research, when they're relating with someone who's a secure, because the secure doesn't have a lot of angst around their needs. They just assume the other person's doing their best. I don't know what that would be like. To just assume that the other person is, doing what they can to meet their needs. And so they don't get all this angst about the sustainability of the connection. Whereas people who have the insecure style really have a lot of angst around the connection, and it feels world ending when the person with the avoidant attachment style actually starts to move away.
Right.
So then they go after them, and that's where the huge friction happens, because then the person who's trying to get away as their survival strategy, trying to avoid going too deep, wants to go further away. But you know what then also can come into these kind of relationships, in addition to the kind of dead eroticism, is a cycle of violence, right? Where the person who, the person who's avoidant will use closeness and bring you into the relationship, but then they start to get uncomfortable and the tension starts to build for them. And that's what happens in any cycle of violence, is that the tension starts to build for one person or another. And that tension has to be released. And so the tension is released through abandonment. And then you're at the point in the cycle where there's distancing in the relationship, and the whole thing opens up to a big drama, a big question. Will the relationship resume? And so then you're in this cycle, and that can give you a kind of false sense of eroticism that's based on danger type hormones. I'm sure we've all had experiences of these kind of relationships where, there's intense eroticism or what feels like eroticism when we come back together in that seduction phase, and it feels so good and it's such a high, but then the tension starts to build and there's always the cycle.
Yeah.
So that can happen really easily. And I'm not talking about a physical cycle of violence necessarily, although it can be.
Words are violent.
But distancing and abandonment and that sort of thing, because the avoidant person starts to feel that their survival is threatened. That is the tension that builds up for them. And that's when they need to distance.
It's so fascinating, and we could talk about this for a week straight, for sure. Thank you so much for bringing this to us. It was even more than what I thought. So thank you. I just adore you. Would you like to share with us what your free gift is?
Yes, well, actually, there are 3 free gifts available on my website. So let me share a little bit about the Passion Path. As Mia said, I've been doing this for a long time. It's been almost 10 years now. And the Passion Path is now 3 pathways that kind of meet you where you are in your journey. So one is the power to shine, and this is claiming the power to be seen, and this is part of what we've been talking about today, is claiming that power to be visible. So by claiming a relationship, for instance, with someone who has a secure attachment style and moving towards having your needs met in that way, you're actually moving towards being seen. So that's my dream alchemy pathway, and it's a complete pathway that will take you all the way through resolving trauma to doing the work of reclaiming your creativity and releasing a new identity for yourself, and then becoming the solution for someone else. There's the power to shape. So the power to shape is really all about correcting what I call creative malfunction, which is that you don't have enough inner stability in what you want to actually create what you want. So in my Apocalyptic Passion program, which is part of this doorway, it's the free part of this doorway, that is the power to shape. I talk about birthing demonic disappointment like Lilith. So this is the creative malfunction. We know what we want, but we don't have enough stability within us to actually birth it. So we birth disappointment. This is different from starting at the beginning of healing your trauma, because it's actually about working with the structures of trauma. The emotional pieces of it have been largely healed. You've done the work of confronting your past, but now you're left with the structural, habitual expression of trauma, which is how, this birthing of demonic disappointment as Lilith, birthing in the hinterlands comes through. So we really work with reclaiming and utilizing creative power. So for those 2 pathways, Apocalyptic Passion is your free gift. It's a series of invocations working powerfully with emotion. And for the Dream Alchemy pathway, there's like an introduction to Dream Alchemy, a sort of shorter Dream Alchemy experience, which will teach you some elements of why some of the elements of why we can't conceive what we want. So they're related, but a little bit different, and starting at the place of healing your trauma. And then there's a third pathway, which I'm super excited about. It's the pathway to show the way. And this is where people actually are stepping onto the pathway at the place where they're ready to distill the essence of their experience. They feel called to make an impact in the world. They feel called to be what I call passionate warriors, leading the way, striking forward with solutions for the world. And I actually help them do the work to take the essence of their experience and their wisdom and turn it into a journey and a pathway forward. So this is branding work, it's business development work, but it's also personal development at a whole different level. And I have a brand identity and business development challenge that's available on that pathway. So you go to the website, thepassionpath.vision, and you choose your pathway among those 3 powers: the power to shine, shape, and show the way. So that's my free gift.
It's brilliant. And I have to say that Rebecka is my brand development strategist. She has been we've worked together for 4 years, 2 different branding, into Mia Saenz from the Passion Muse, and then into Women Making Miracles. So she is top notch in everything she does. And I can say that because as we grow and develop as women, we become incredibly secure with ourselves, and we can allow others to shine as bright because we love their work and it's the truth. So I want you to understand that you need to check out her work. If I could say that I have, which I never even thought about it till I'm sitting here, if I have a teacher at the moment, it's absolutely Rebecka. She is my right hand and my left hand in the sense that I go to her for all this stuff. So she's brilliant. So please check out her work. Okay, so before we leave, will you share with the world what one last thing from your heart or your mind? You shared a lot, but what you really want us to know?
Yeah, I think at the heart of this is letting go. We often think, especially when we come from traumatic backgrounds, and especially when we learned to achieve as a result of those backgrounds, that we can change any and everything. And this is about really letting go and saying, okay, there are some things that are not mine to change, and just releasing that and letting things be as they are and finding our way through without that urgent need to correct, if you will.
Yeah.
Without trying to achieve our way into the new reality.
I love that. Let's all surrender into that for sure. Thank you so much, Rebecka. It was a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. And thank you all for joining us for Make Love Real, How to Create More Love in Your Life. And we'll see you in another episode. Bye.